And when America was founded, it was founded a long, long time ago. We were just a fledgling nation back then. Countless battles were yet to be fought, but we had honor. We were right in our course, and we had stringent. First, we had our own bill of government, and then, what? Jimmy, please look at the board.
You upset, Bob? Why? This is America, home of the free, brave, and those free of bravery. Our media and those that hold their leashes forge new heights for this fledgling empire to soar to. Let's expand, much like America, through a new history lesson, a brief history of American empire.
Yeah.
It looks like one of my comic books.
God damn it, Jimmy. Look at the rules, man.
Have you heard of Eugene V. Debs?
Who's Eugene V. Debs?
Eugene Victor Debs was the young leader of the American Railway Union, ARU. The son of shopkeepers, he grew up in Terre Haute, Indiana. That's in Indiana. And he got his start railway unionist. During the Depression and Panic of 1893, Debs and a small group formed the ARU to unite all railroad workers. Obviously, this was to the chagrin of many young rich whippersnappers who were running America at that time, as in J.D. Rockefeller, Jay Gould, or J.P. Morgan. They all hated him a lot, and since they liked him so little, they were paying off the media, as you can see here in this picture of him depicted as the crowned man in this picture, with the crown that says Debs on it. They were depicting him as a scamp and a charlatan, but really, he was just trying to peacefully settle a workers' union.
What does all this mean?
Well, I bet you didn't know he ran for president from within jail! This demonstrates conflict theory by showing that the two classes, Debs being in the lower class and representing the lower class, would come into direct conflict with the upper class, who is also the bunch of rich assholes.
I don't think you can say that.
Tattling is for communists, Billy. Moving forward, let's talk a little bit about World War II. While World War II is what we usually think about as a period of great heroism by America, it is also a period of great inner strife and conflict, as the profiteers wage a war to gather as much money from the war fund as they can, and our own citizens are forced into a sort of forced internment camps for the Japanese citizens. All this mistrust in our own system, and it is imminent that we are facing internal conflict.
I had no idea. We don't learn about any of this stuff in school.
That's right, Sally. You don't. You don't learn about any of it. Because we have a face to uphold around the world and at home for our citizens. And that's exactly what the media used when it was conjuring up schemes for putting the Japanese citizens of the United States in the internment camps that we did during World War II. I bet you've never heard of the Dresden bombings. Oh, you haven't? Well, the Dresden bombings were bombings held after World War II was over. See, America had just developed a new weapon. They named it the fire bombs. It will later be called napalm when they use it in Vietnam. But there was a town called Dresden in Germany, and they were using this town to test the bombs after World War II had ended. Have you kids learned about Vietnam yet?
Yeah! I all know about them dirty commies.
Yeah, I know all about the domino theory.
Of course you've heard about our military conflicts in the Vietnam War. But what I'm going to talk about today, the war that started at home during the Vietnam War. Or maybe you've heard in the spring of 1971, the Vietnam Veterans Against the War marched onto Washington, called it Dewey Canyon 3, after 2 earlier U.S. invasions into Laos, next door to Vietnam. 1,000 vets marched onto Congress, and one by one, they returned their medals the nation had given them. Martin Luther King even spoke out against the war, saying social progress is ignored when the guns of war become a national obsession. The bombs in Vietnam explode at home. He had no idea how true this would be. A few weeks after the assassination of Martin Luther King, a man named Dan Berrigan and his local board got together, removed files, and using homemade napalm, set fire to draft records. And he wrote, "Our apologies, good friends, for the fracture of good order, the burning of paper instead of children."
Wow, I didn't know that. But I guess America is more heroic now than it was back then, right?
I would certainly hope so, Bob, but that's entirely incorrect. Did you know that most of the conflict involving the Middle East stems from American affairs within the Middle East? Specifically, how we overthrew any trace of democracy. We couldn't let democracy establish itself organically. We had to go establish democracy our way, so it benefited our empirical interests. On November 4th, 1979, when angry Iranians seized the U.S. Embassy in the capital city of Tehran and took everyone hostage, they demanded that Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the notorious Shah, who had fled with U.S. help when rebellion swept the country, be returned to face trial. The U.S. had done so much to prop up the Shah's brutally repressive regime and overthrow the government of Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953. This was a democratic government. On May 1st, 1951, Mossadegh, an aristocrat, a nationalist, a doctor of law, and a founder of the National Front of Iran political party, was elected prime minister by the Iranian parliament. It was the first time a prime minister had been chosen without the Shah's approval. Eventually, Mossadegh was even elected Man of the Year by Time magazine, calling him the Iranian George Washington. And this makes it all the more ironic when America throws over his government, his democratic government, because the profits aren't going to American pockets.
How does any of this affect us now?
After we reinstated the Shah, there was his rise to power and the ruin of his power. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company was renamed British Petroleum. U.S. oil companies got 40% of the oil business. This, coupled with the Shah's white revolution for economic, social, and cultural and electoral reforms, infuriated Muslim clerics. The Shah has violated the Constitution. He is submitting to the will of America and Israel. This coming from Ruhollah Khamenei. He was the most relentless in his criticism. And he called upon the Iranian people to boycott the referendum on the White Revolution. So, the Shahs arrested him and transferred him to a prison where he continued his protests from within the confines of his cell. Understandably, U.S. relations with the Muslim world have been poisoned ever since. Billy and Sally, what did we learn?
My name's Bob. I learned that we need to be aware of our country's actions and be aware that there are other people affected by things that happen in our history and current events that we may not be aware of. We have to learn about the lower classes and minorities in our country and how our country's actions affect other countries.
It's also important to know that states operate differently, and what's beneficial for our nation isn't always as beneficial for others. But power, politics, and authority all go together, and sometimes it's not the way that we'd like.
Okay, kids, I guess now you know the real side of America. The empirical side. The side that is America.